Good evening, everyone. Online, okay. Welcome to Culture Matters with Kailash, an initiative by FolkBrain where we aim at exploring the ancient and folk cultures of India. Our guest for today will be Dr. Pawan Jain. Dr. Pawan Jain is an art historian, curator, author, professor, textile designer, and an entrepreneur. She is the co founder of two successful textile and handloom ventures, reviving natural dyeing and printing processes and lost weaves. Dr. Jain is a visiting faculty at the National Museum Institute, NMI, and teaches Hindu temple architecture and comparative aesthetics at the post graduation level, besides guiding PhD students in art history. She has taught fashion at the Institution of Fashion Technology, NIFT, New Delhi. Dr. Jain has specialization in Jain art. She has authored the book Kaivalyam, Jain manuscript paintings in the National Museum, and her second book, Chitram Vastram, is in the final stage of completion. Besides this, she has published several art history papers in various journals and bulletins. She is fun loving, a compulsive explorer, and has traveled across the world and India for research, business, and pleasure. Dear ma'am, it's a pleasure for us to have you here with us today. Please take over the mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Shashank. May I be allowed to share the screen now?
You can start managing it now. I've shared it.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. So, today's topic, sacred and sensuous erotic sculptures on temple walls. We have all had some kind of engagement with this particular subject or the erotic imagery that we see on temple walls. Some of us have also faced this problem of explaining to our guests, especially overseas guests, when they come back with this quizzical expression on their faces, looking for an explanation as to why such kind of imagery is there on temple walls. This is such a vastly debated subject that even a novice does not shy away from passing his verdict on this. In some people will say that they are there to test the sincerity of the devotees, or they are there to train people, mostly youngsters, in the art of love, or to initiate them into sexual pleasures. Or some also say that probably there was, to increase the population, the medieval kings ordered this kind of art on temple walls. We have seen that the secular art, the secular plastic art, is of course replete with the sensuousness or erotic depiction on everyday articles like combs or toiletries, furniture. The palace walls were always painted with such imagery, or natyashalas, rangshalas, or brothels. Actually, they would have some kind of adulterous themes for sexual gratification. All right. All this actually indicates the explicit interest in sex and encouragement of the bhog, or the indulgence or enjoyment or consumption of sex, or that aspect of sex in Hindu culture. But to have them on temple walls is something nobody can think of. So we are here to explore as to what may have been the different possible reasons for their contribution towards this depiction. So outwardly, it may appear to be in contradiction with the Hindu cultural goals of, say, tap or sannyas or vairagya, which is detachment, austerity, renunciation. But if you dabble a little bit deeply into it, you may realize it really is not in contrast or in opposition to all these. Because the main four purusharthas, or the four main aims of life of a human being, as they have been enumerated in our scriptures are Kama, Arth, Dharma, Moksha. Arth, of course, everybody has to go out and make a living, earn some money. Dharma here does not mean the ritualistic, practices of religion, but one has to lead his life in a righteous way. And moksha is, of course, the ultimate liberation from life. And the first Purusharth that I talk about is Kama. Kama here is any kind of pleasure or enjoyment. So we see that Kama as being one of the main Purusharthas is and very important part of human life, and the very explicit recognition of the bhoga pleasure or this aspect of sex in Hindu culture, it is also attested by the so many Kama Sutras that have come down to us, especially most popular being that of Vatsayan, right? And in fact, it's still very popular, and it is considered as an essential part of education in those days and even now. And in fact, it talks about varieties of alingans and kisses, coital postures, etc. They were all invented and commented upon. In fact, some branches of Hindu religion also maintain that there is no pleasure equal to that of love, or no bliss equal to the or greater than the ecstatic union of between man and woman. In fact, Osho, Rajneesh, strongly believed in this theory, and this also probably became the reason for him to flee the country. In this also sculpture from Khajuraho, you can see there is one Acharya in the corner who himself is participating in some kind of sexual play. Okay. So now let's see, our inquiry takes us back to as to where it all may have started from. So let's talk about the ancient river civilizations. All right. They were all agrarian societies, be it Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Chinese, or our own Sindhu Saraswati, or as we commonly call it, Indus Valley civilization. All right. Agricultural community these were, and their prosperity and their well-being largely depended upon the fertility of the soil and in turn good harvests, and this led to performance of fertility rites. Okay, so these fertility rites were intended to secure the fertility of the fields because they were all agrarian societies. And secondly, the most important thing is I want to emphasize upon, they were thought of as belonging to the special competence of women because they knew it was only the woman who was able to reproduce. And in fact, they stretched it to another level, that the same kind of ability of her to reproduce, or the fertility aspect of it, is also responsible in the fertility of the soil, or for the propagation of the vegetational life or animal life for that matter. All right. So on your screen, you can see Egyptian goddess of fertility on your left, motherhood, sex. Her name is Isis, and she's shown here breastfeeding a child. Now this is a religious culture. Okay. This is not that she's breastfeeding a child in a private quarters. So this was a celebration. Like her motherhood was a thing of celebration here. And similarly, you have goddess Inanna from Sumerian or Mesopotamian goddess, who's the goddess of love, beauty, desire, sex, and fertility. So, what I mean to say, these figures or these, sculptures were meant for worshipping. They were not for fulfilling anybody's, sexual desire for that matter. Okay, let's go next. Uh, in Greek religion, we have Aphrodite, who was the goddess of fertility. She was also the mother of Eros, the god of love. In Roman mythology, we have Venus, who was the goddess of love, sex, beauty, fertility, and of course, she's the Aphrodite's counterpart. So, looking at all this, what you're looking at on screen, it's a very beautiful painting by Botticelli, the Renaissance painter, and here it's called Birth of Venus. So, what we are seeing now procreation and copulation. They were very sacred function. All right. Hence, there was a great importance that was attached to fertility and its various symbols in the most ancient ages. So the association of sexual union with agriculture was a universal primitive ritual, which was also imbued with some kind of magic, and right from the time of ancient civilizations. Of course, it ensured multiplication or revitalization of animals, vegetation, earth, soil, human beings, along with their happiness, prosperity, abundance, and auspiciousness. And also, as a corollary to that, it implicitly meant that it would, be used for aversion of evil, death, misfortune, or calamity. So this cult of mother goddess too, in a way or the other, in some one way or the other, it is related to the same primitive thought. uh, what you are seeing, Venus of Willendorf on your left, mother goddess figure. This is an idealization of a female figure. Not that she's the ideal beauty, but the purpose for which she was created as mother goddess, because she's the goddess of fertility. So what you are seeing, enhanced breasts, her vulva, swollen belly, they are all very, very pronounced. In fact, this set the tone for the later figures of Mother Goddess. And this statuette is very, very small, made of limestone, and this is almost considered to be 25,000 years old. All right. And on the right, we have, of course, our own lady from Indus Valley, which you can see in the National Museum. Venus of Willendorf, you can see in Vienna Museum, because Willendorf is a place in Austria. That's where she was found. So this kind of iconography, this set the tone for later figures of Mother Goddess, all exhibiting their genitals or exaggerated breasts, large buttocks, thighs, sometimes a large stomach too. So what comes across very clearly here, that there was a tremendous sense of celebration of female sexuality there. Then other themes, of course, such as birth-giving women or defloration, also made their appearance in religious parlance. The phenomenon of reproduction, and there was some kind of precedent sex activity in front of the deity, led the ancients to believe in the efficacy of some kind of promiscuity or adultery as a fertilizing agent for their fields. Yeah. Then let's look at some of the other later religions, what if there was any sexual element in that. So we find that sexual symbolism in devotion is not particular to the Hindus only. In the biblical Song of Songs sung by the Christian mystics worshipping Christ as the divine bridegroom, the opening verse goes like, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of the mouth, for your breasts are better than wine." And same kind of sentiment we find in Islam Sufism also. If you go to Nizamuddin and if you listen to any of the Qawwalis, there is lot of, you are always addressing Allah as your beloved. Chap tilak sab chini re muh se naina milai ke. What does it mean? You have snatched away all traces of me with one glance of your enchanting eyes. In Buddhist religion, you can see on your screen at Ajanta caves or in Karle caves in Maharashtra, one can see these voluptuous Mithuna couples, in embrace. So what is particular or peculiar to Hindus is probably that it is their genius for pursuing an idea to its extreme end, and which was aided by their vivid imagination. Similarly, we have a Parshna temple from Khajuraho, which is replete with erotic imagery. And it is said that on Jain temples, such depiction was for protective purposes. So the concept of fertility and abundance has survived in Indian thought in some form or the other. There are these two beautiful young women you can see on screen holding the branch of a tree, touching the trunk of the tree with just one toe of theirs. They are called the Dohada figures, or you can call them Amrabhanjikas or Shalabhanjikas. And it was strongly believed that when a young maiden touches the trunk of a tree just with one toe of hers, the tree starts to blossom. Such was the belief in the magical efficacy of female sexuality. Thus, all the other symbols of fertility, say fulvas, as we call it, punghata, or the kalash, the lotus, several symbols of tree of life, yakshis or mithunas, all of them are early signs of abundance and are being consistently used in Hindu religious rites. In fact, we cannot imagine starting any religious rite without having established the kalash, yeah, the ghata before the actual puja starts. So, according to me, it is the behavioral or actual living aspect of religion rather than philosophical or rationalistic aspect that forms the proper setting of the Hindu temple. I've been talking about the Mithuna couples, so it's very important for us to throw some light as to what are they, what do you call Mithun? So you may have heard some parents like to name their child as Mithun. So Mithun Chakravarti, very popular name we all know about. So, since it must be something very auspicious or meaning good, only then somebody is named as that. So there is no way we should be looking at Mithuns or Mithuna couples in a any derogatory sense. All right. So, to quote from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it says that just as a man closely embraced by a beloved woman knows nothing more of a or without or within, so also does the person, especially the spiritual person who is embraced with the Prajnatma spirit, knows nothing more. And he experiences supreme bliss when he's undergoing that experience. All right. So, this state of man and woman in close embrace is a symbol of moksha, which so say scriptures also. And this final release or reunion of the true principles, essence, and nature. This is Purush and Prakriti. And the name of this conjoined symbol is called the Mithuna, the state of being a couple. And not only couple, uh, auspicious couple, because it is always attached to some kind of auspiciousness or mangal. All right. In fact, the very concept of linga and yoni grew out of the very same significance. So this particular symbol is carved on Hindu, Jain, Buddhist, chaityas. Everywhere you will find them. I just showed you some, and probably we'll see some more. So most of the temples, what we talk about, the erotic figures, they are all replete with these Mithuna figures. So I will just take some more time and throw some light as to what are the different kinds of Mithuna figures that you find on temple walls. So number one, we will talk about Lavanyamay. Lavanya means grace, graceful couples. It could be God and God, his consort, or a man and woman sitting together in a graceful posture. At the most, the god may place his one hand on one of the breasts of the his consort, like the Uma Maheshwar couple that you can see here, but there is no element of eroticism here. Then we have the asakta, or the amorous couple, indulgent, addictive, embracing or kissing with apparent perception of the feeling of love. That's the second kind. Then we have the Maithun Rat, which are couples in copulation in actual sexual intercourse with or without helpers in hundreds of passionate postures. And the last category that we talk about is the Bhrashta, or the corrupt Mithunas, where single or couples in perverted sexual acts, man engaged with a mere parade of licentious sexual orgies, mass copulation, and other postures. So these Mithunas have been depicted at the religious shrines, all on all sects of India: Buddhists, Jains, Vaishnav, Shaiv, Shauras, Shaktas alike. And its usage was never limited to a particular sect. And it is also wrong to presume that its depiction had some kind of affiliation to a specific religious or philosophical thought, or it was the expression of a particular ritual always. Although at times we will also see that at times it is a depiction of a particular ritual too, but not at all times and not on all the temple walls, on different religious temple walls. So these amorous couples or mithunas have been depicted in India consistently and almost invariably for nearly 2,000 years, right, starting from 2nd century BC. And the difference of mithunas from one temple to the other is that of only degree, all right? And there is a positive acceptance of this formula of art. Then now we'll talk about some of the Shilp Shastras or the religious texts, what they talk about. Do we have the sanction of these texts when we see these kind of sculptures on temple walls? So, like the performance of ritual sexual act in front of deity, this depiction of erotic imagery also is considered as magico-propitiatory or magico-defensive. So, any kind of decoration was considered very auspicious or evil-removing. Gods, goddesses, divinities, devanganas, mithunas, kinnaras, gandharvas, yakshas. All these are they form big library of all the decorative motifs that we find on temple walls and on secular buildings also, right? So the different Shilp Shastras, while recording the use of alankar is the decoration in art and architecture, specifically mention the auspicious and protective properties. These depictions were for pushti, happiness, shanti. The Agni Puran and the Vrihat Samhita prescribe mithunas and other auspicious alankars to decorate the doors. The Skand Puran indicates the function of sexual depiction in the use of the word varnartham, which is warding away in connection with lightning and other dangers. If there are, these kind of erotic figures which are there displayed on the walls, they definitely perform this act. Okay. So coming back to the Bhrashta Mithunas, that because that is these are the ones that are most disturbing. We are not worried about the Lavanyamay or the amorous couples, but Bhrashta Mithunas is something that bothers all of us. All right. So, this depiction of Methun couples and orgies flanking the deities in the temples remind us of the original function of the sexual act, which was being, carried out near the deities. In fact, I'm witness to this in weddings in Rajasthan. On the night of the Rath Jaga, the women folk of the household, they sing all kinds of obscene or ashleel songs to invoke the Kul Devi, so that she comes and blesses the, to be couple. So this, under the influence of magical belief, obscenity or ashleel was used as a device for stimulating generative powers. And mind you, these scenes do not occupy prominent places in the temples. They are often depicted on the lower plinth level, uh, which are by and large they are hidden from the, from your eye level. So any visitor, unless and until he makes an extra effort to, look for them, he will not be able to see them. Okay. So when we talk about some kind of ashleel element which is considered, which has the efficacy for fertility, we are reminded of the spring festivals that we all celebrate in India, be it Bihu or Baisakhi or Holi for that matter. In fact, the presiding deities of these festivals is Krishna and Kamdeva, who are both love of, God of love. All right. So, on such occasions, the ordinary morality of the society was given up in favor of some kind of, licentious behavior for the pleasure of the deities. And by far one of the most celebrated festival in which this kind of bacchanalian element was is predominant is Holi, where some kind of adultery is permissive. So on your screen, you can see Madanika holding a pichkari in one hand, probably trying to, throw color on a beloved or husband or whatever. And in the other panel, you can see there are, five friends playing amongst them. They're playing Holi. They have the pichkaris in their hands. There are troughs full of probably fragrant colored water here. So in fact, this kind of festival also was being celebrated. I'll take you back to the Greek civilization. So, Greek fertility festivals also gradually became occasions for some kind of sexual gratification. And especially amongst Hindus, we feel that since man and God is one, we say Aham Brahmam. So the needs of the flesh are also needs of the spirit. And the Ras Leela dance, the Pushti Margis, the Vallabh Panthis, uh, which is the one of the very favorite ritual of this particular sect. In fact, it soon became a krida or a kind of play for the cultured citizens. And in fact, this was, I'm talking about around 15th century, where because it's also called the path of comfort, Pushti Marg, because you will see, king engaged in this Ras Leela surrounded by his female companions, and all kinds of, erotic behavior was permissible in public for that one day. Now I'm going to show you some of these Bhrasht Mithunas figures from, as I have been claiming that they are present all over India on different sects, really, the temples of different sects. So I'm just giving you some examples here. Markandeshwar temple in Maharashtra, Oshia temple, the Jain temple, Rajasthan. Then you have Tripurantaka temple, Karnataka, Modhera Sun temple. Now look at the size. As I explained to you earlier, they have been allocated very very small size at the plinth level, where they are all hidden from normal eye level. All right, and they are not being glorified. They are not on the main jangha or the main wall of the temple, and these are very very insignificant places where they are placed because of their small size and the space which is available to them. This was not It was not possible to treat them very aesthetically, and it was also not a requirement to treat them aesthetically, because they were not there to please or to sensitize the visitors. All right, so these Mithunas have, as I've told you, they have been depicted in the entire geographical vastness of India, from Kashmir to Kerala, Gujarat to Assam, etc., etc., even Nepal, Sikkim, and nowhere it was rejected as a taboo or even as something very distasteful. So, in fact, the regional schools of Maharashtra, Mysore, Gujarat, they recognized the necessity of the depiction of sexual motives, presumably for their magical functions. And we can see some more then. So you can see Ranakpur Jain Temple, Rajasthan, then Keshwa Temple, Somnathpur, Nanda Devi Temple. So I'm trying to show you temples from different regions, hills, down south, everywhere. So the canons of these regional schools did not permit the portrayal of sexual motives on the main wall or the janga, where beautiful and elegant forms of Sura Sundaris and deities, they testify to the skill and aesthetic competence and sensibility of the artist. Thus, although there was no dearth of artistic talent in these regions, erotic motives or these kind of mithunas received very insignificant and often very crude treatment on the temples, indicating the rigidity of the convention. So, in the south, of course, these erotic figures are believed to protect buildings from evil eye. Or, wait, yeah. So what you're seeing here, there's a sculpture from Virupaksha temple, Hampi. There are quite a few Virupaksha temples. So do not please get confused. This I'm showing you from Hampi area. And of course, other themes like defloration, etc., were also very popular, just to show the fertility aspect of women. Okay, and it was believed that they protect the buildings from evil eye. And you can see the lady in the center here. Her genitals are being exposed with the help of one man on one side and a woman on the other side. And on the right side, you can see an amorous couple seen, kissing very passionately. This is from Kailash temple, Ellora. And this, of course, is on the Gopuram, or the entrance door of a temple in South India and Tamil Nadu. Uh, if you have seen, I'm sure many of you may have gone and seen the South Indian temples in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka. See, the Gopuras are, even higher than the main building inside the, precinct of the temple. And such is the practice in South India. So, of course, here this particular sculpture is many, many times enlarged. So, there is no way you can see this sculpture standing, from ground level. All right. So, the point I'm trying to make is they were always hidden from the normal, range of the human eye. And then, of course, the most notorious, as notorious as Khajuraho temples, we come to the Konark temple. What you are seeing, there's these sculptures from Konark temple on your left and right. These couples are seen from Lingaraj temple, Bhubaneswar. So the priests of the Jagannath temple actually at Puri believe that erotic sculptures scare away the demons of lightning, cyclone, evil spirits. In fact, in Nepal too, the same function has been attributed to erotic motifs. And this belief has also been recorded in the Utkal Khand of the Skand Puran. In fact, everybody goes to Jagannath Puri temple, and Puri temple itself has many, many erotic sculptures. Some of them have been destroyed, and right now, most of them have been whitewashed so that very little of them can be seen now. So, what you're looking at on screen are, of course, one of the finest Pahari paintings based on Geet Govind, Jaydev's creation. So it is also important to note that literature is a mirror of society, and it kind of faithfully reflects the tastes and the beliefs of the contemporary people. So the very interest of the society in the enjoyment of sex is very, very, explicitly described in the ancient literature, which further finds expression in different art forms. In fact, I can take you back to Kalidas's time, his creation Kumar Sambhav, which talks about the birth of Kumar, or Skanda, Kartikeya, as we call him by different names, where he went on to describing the love sport between Shiva and Parvati in a, to the minutest detail, and so much so that it is a legend, or I don't know how true it is, that Shiva cursed him and he fell prey to leprosy, and he had to perform all kind of penance to be cured of that disease. So, devotion and love have been inspiring sources of poetry among the Hindus. And of course, these two emotions meet on a very higher plane. And some of the great poets are like Mirabai or, say, Jaydev, I can quote. So, the Geet Govind may be interpreted as, mystical, religious, it is a creation, but on the face of it, or it comes across very clearly that it is a grand treatise on Shringar, and mainly Sambhog Shringar, though it may be deemed as Radha Krishna eroticism. So I would say the background of aristocratic society and its cultivation of Shringar also gave further boost in these kind of depiction. So just as we have seen, the literature was the paintings were inspired by the literature. Similarly, there are sculptures which are being inspired from literature. What you are seeing here, you have sumptuous Rekha in fully bedecked if you recall the movie Utsav, and we are talking about none other than Vasant Sena, the play Mrichikatikam. This was the play the movie was based on, and Charu Dutt, where Shekhar Suman was acting as. And on the right, you have the stele depicting the scene from the same play, all right, of Mrichikatikam, where you have Vasant Sena, fallen down, inebriated, and she's being, helped by two helpers uh, so that she can get up. And you can note her accentuated breasts or depiction of genitals. So everywhere we are seeing in these sculptures, there is a repeated one theme, that there is a true celebration of female sexuality, and there is nothing to be shy about. And it was not something that one had to be apologetic about. Okay. So, in fact, literature, painting, sculpture, cinema are all expressions of the same aesthetic urge of the people, and they truly reflect what the society is comprised of. Another play, Prabodh Chandrodaya, which was enacted in Chandela Court very often. It was very popular. And the uh, main, it was the protagonists of the play are, of course, King Vivek, who's shown here in the central panel on top, with his wife Mati. And on the panel below, you have King Moha with his wife Mithya Drishti. So these are all very, sorry, yeah, this is all personification of the of different concepts: moh, mithya drishti, vivek, mati, right? So what we see here on this particular wait, my arrow is not, here I got it. So they are flanked by this, generous couple is flanked by Karpur Manjari, where there is water dripping from her hair, and there is a Hansa, squatted here, who's drinking that water. Because we attribute Hansa with this quality of Neer Kshir Vivek. This particular bird can distinguish between water and milk, or doodh alag or pani alag. That's what it is capable of. Whereas this particular couple, they are flanked with this alas kanya, where see, on the pretext of scratching her underarm, probably she's trying to show some nail marks or some love bites from the love sport of the previous night. So these kind of the literature also influenced some times what we saw on the temple walls. Now let's talk about some other sects like the Shaktas, which actually believe in some kind of Hindu mysticism, and they feel that the active principle in the universe is feminine. They assert that all the gods, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, they themselves are passive, but that the Shakti, or literally the energy, is responsible for their activity. But it is also difficult to worship Shakti in an abstract form, and for that is why, for the benefit of the worshippers, she is endowed with a different form. So what you are looking at is the sculpture from Chausa Jogini Temple, Hirapur, near Bhubaneswar. So she is Kameshwari, the female energy of Kamadev, the god of love, and she has arrow in one hand and a bow in the other hand. These are the main attributes also of the of Kamdev. All right. So these are called the Shaktas, and they are basically divided into two sects: the Dakshin Margis, who openly or publicly worship Shakti, and then there are Vam Margis, who have this complete secrecy in worship and are called the Tantrics, and they believe in offering some kind of magical device called the yantra, and they chant all kinds of syllables like ring, klim, which are supposed to be imbued with magic, and uh, if if chanted in the right manner, probably you will gain occult power or siddhis. And they also believe in these five M's: the Madhya, Mans, Madhya, Matsya, Mudra, and Mithun. So Mithun is the last five, one of the five things that they offer. So, at the gross level, it is, of course, Mithuna is copulation between man and woman. But at a higher level, it is, for these tantrics, they consider this as the yogic union between the energy or the kundalini, which travels, from your lowermost Muladhara chakra and goes up and reaches the topmost Sahasrara chakra. So it is through this experience of bliss, of Anand, that the supreme reality is perceived. So this is basically the one of the yantras, or the Kamkala yantra, that they offer to the deity, and the outward meaning of this is very, very erotic. Okay, so now you're looking at Raja Rani temple, one of the erotic figures here, and this, of course, is the famous Kandarya Mahadev temple. So, in the tantric religious climate, these Mithuna couples now are occupying the prominence on the main walls or the jangas of the temples like Khajuraho and Konark and other temples in Orissa. In fact, if you look at this particular diagram, this reminds us of the Kamkala yantra, which was, mentioned in the Orissan text Shil Prakash, and it, says that it is there for magical, protective purpose and propitiatory purpose, and there is this. This is the particular symbolism underlying this yantra. And in the best temple, which are dedicated to Shakti and to Rudra, Shiva also, this particular yantra must be certainly placed, and then that monument will, stand there unmoved forever. Such is the, sanction given in the religious architectural text from Orissa. So, of course, this head down pose also seems to embody, the double meaning, or the Sandhya Bhasha, which the tantrics use, which have two meanings. Okay, on the people who are not initiated into this particular cult, they will only see the erotic imagery, whereas people who are initiated into this, they will see the underlying yantra which is being offered to the deity. All right. So this symbolism or this unification, this head down pose, is also considered to be the, unification of two breaths, Ida Pingla, or which are the polar opposites, and where they meet in the middle path of Sushumna in order to lead the yogi beyond this phenomenal world. So, thus, the portrayal of these, human sexual poses or kambandhas, according to this particular tantric Shilp Shastra, were for those who were uninitiated, from whom the actual yantra was being hidden. Hence, we can see that these poses had multiple purpose on the temple walls. Then we have to also see what was the social or economical or cultural climate of the period that we are talking about. So around, we are talking about medieval India, and around between 8th and 12th centuries in North India, it was the Rajputs who emerged as the main military class, and of course, they most of these major dynasties, they rose from a very, very humble position, say of local chiefs, and some of them also had tribal origin. In fact, they rose to power by subjugating the weaker rulers of the neighborhood. So these rulers who were not trained to rule, and they rose from a very, very humble background, they depended on the Brahmins, for the recognition of their social status, lineage, and and to please the Brahmins, they had to express their loyalty to dharma, and because of this, there were a lot of dan, purta dharmas, building, temple building activities, tanks, charitable works. They all became very, very important constituent of religious life, and it also exhibited the power of the ruler. So you will feel that all the grand temples that were built, they are all from this period, be it Brihadeshwara temple, or all of temples from Orissa, or Khajuraho temples, or temples in Rajasthan or Gujarat, they all belong to this period where each king was, vying for a better position in the society by making bigger and bigger temples, right? So these kind of, so say let's take for instance Harshvardhan, King Harshvardhan, or uh, Lalita Ditya Muktapid. These kings were scholars in their own right. They would hold debates. They were, proficient all kinds of arts, literature, etc., or even in, all kinds of weaponry. But these kings that we are talking about, they just rose from a very, 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 very humble background. So, for under such social conditions, it was the right soil for the nourishment and development of Puranic and Tantric religions, superstitions, supernatural power beliefs, magic, etc. Because it's only when one is not very enlightened that you will fall prey to these kind of practices. And fertility and vegetation rites, agricultural utsavs, purificatory Shuddhi rites, local vratas, they were all reinstated. Belief in magical power of sex was reinforced in this atmosphere and seen as a shortcut device to moksha, which is very, very important here. All right. And Mathuna or the Kamkala was offered to the deity for gaining siddhis. So the king wants to conquer his enemy, or he's pursuing a particular woman, or jisko what we call vashikaran. So they were all after, these tantric acharyas to so that they could attain these kind of occult power. So by this time, auspiciousness that we saw about eroticism or the sexual depiction of or the female sexuality that was being celebrated, it became a vehicle for the articulation of the sensuous tastes of the cultural elite. And the very cultic function was of mother goddess or of female sexuality was superseded by the aesthetic and the sensual appeal. Then let's talk about temples themselves. We talked about the society that these temples were built, and then what became of the temples also. So the temple was not exclusively a place of worship. Much of the social, political life of the community, especially in villages and small towns, which even to some extent happens today also, it is always centered around the temple. In fact, Birla Mandir in India, in Delhi, is very popular for girls and boys to meet for the first time. The gardens in Birla Mandir, they are being used for the same purpose even till date. And in South India, you have these Agrahara settlements, even today, the Vaishnav or the Shaiv Agraharas, where there were huge land grants which were given to the Brahmins and to build the temples and to propagate religion and education. So these temple settlements, they became cities by themselves. But I just spoke about Somnathpur Keshwa temple. This itself was a very big Vaishnav agrahar for that matter, and they were all exempted from state taxation, and there was very minimal interference by the royal officials also. So in that sense, economy of that place totally depended on and around the activities of the temple. So with the result, these large temples themselves became, power centers. And of course, the priests and the functionaries that were there, they were not always free from corrupt or degenerative effects of this accumulated wealth and power. So, when we talk about corruption in religious spaces, we always, think about the Devdasi tradition that we've had in India, and it's a, pity that it was abolished, as late as 20th century. All right. Anyway, so, for a medieval Hindu, which I spoke earlier also, an idol is not a representation of God, but God Himself in person. So, when we enter the garbhagriha of a temple, we feel that there is God himself who's sitting there. Yeah, वो विराजमान है वहाँ पर. Huh? And of course, the idol is believed to have most of the needs of the humans. So if we go to Banke Bihari temple, or if we go to Tirupati temple, or if we go to Jagannath temple, we witness these scenes often. I can talk about Mathura very clearly because most of the time when you go, the Bihari ji ab so rahe hain, ab kha rahe hain, now he's bathing, all different acts he's engaged in. So, hence, in public and private worship, idols were bathed, anointed with perfumes, fed, clothed, etc. So, looking at all this, it was realized that probably they had other needs too. So the temple dancers were, appointed by the temple to sing and dance in front of the deity. So initially, it is believed that these women had, overpowered all their sensual desires and were totally dedicated in the service of the deity. But over the period, it is not surprising that a lot of courtesans also got associated, with the temples, and they were also called devdasis. And of course, uh, these were either bought by the temple trustees, or sometimes even parents would come and offer their daughter, as an offering to the deity, to please the deity, because probably some wish of theirs has been fulfilled. So as a you know as a thankful gesture to the deity, they will come and offer one of their daughters to become devdasis. So the duties of the devdasis was, of course, they would sing, dance in front of the deity. Then they would, lead the Rath Yatras, or the processions that are taken out on the road for the general public to see, the famous Jagannath Rath Yatra, or the down south, when you see these chariot processions where all these beautiful bronzes are, they come out. So now, in fact, then slowly, of course, these are the official duties of the Devdasis, but also there was a huge practice. There is literary evidence about this, that there was prostitution under the cover of religion, which was benefiting the temple priests and other temple authorities. So, in fact, the solar temples were notorious for Devdasis. In fact, the main attraction of the sun temples was their erotic art and the Devdasis. Martan Temple in Kashmir, the Modhera Sun Temple, or the Konark Sun Temple all have immense erotic imagery and attract a lot of tourists for this purpose. So, in fact, it is also true that presence of erotic imagery uh, was there to please the sun god, which is attested by some of our religious texts also. In fact, the famous Chinese traveler Yuan Sang, in 7th century, he came to India, and he observes that there was a large number of Devdasi dancing girls, as he's written, in the Sun Temple at Multan, which is in Pakistan today. So, needless to say that these Devdasis provided the sculptors as the ready models for their imagination, and to take shape and make the different moods and gestures immortal in the form of the beautiful Sura Sundaris. And of course, these sculptures, they carved with very, very soft, very softly molded limbs, and very graceful postures, very delicate rendering. And in fact, they account for the not, I will not even say one of the finest and the most numerous in numbers at Khajuraho and Orissa temples. So the master sculptor also derived inspiration from Kam Sutra, for the various asanas and the Kam Bandhas, from Natya Shastra for all the, Nritya Mudras, or from, different other sciences. In fact, Vishnu Dharmotar Puran says this, that uh, if a painter has to paint, or a sculptor, they have to be adept in all the other arts, all the other sciences, all the other literature, so that they can infuse uh, life into whatever that they are creating, or they will get the right twists and turns of the body. And you will know that it is very popular about the Renaissance artists, Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, that they actually used to go and work on cadavers, the dead bodies, and they would dissect them to, learn about the exact human physiology, etc., etc. But I would also say here that uh, this, of course, in the name of the religion, these Sura Sundaris and other sculptures that we have on the temple walls, they were also meant for, uh, for male gaze, for satiating the sexual desire of men somewhere, for the people who are visiting the temples. Okay. So now I will, to conclude, I would say that we have seen how important it is to study the historical and socio-cultural nature of the any motive, and after a repeated use of this motive, it becomes part of design vocabulary, and then it is canonized. And once our shilp shastras or the religious texts have them in, have incorporated them, then the artist is free to use them aesthetically, and then he doesn't have to assign any particular reason to it. So, and then we talked about the concept of sex and fertility, which was used by various ancient world cultures across India, all the religions, all the regions, Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Shaur, Shakta, etc. Then we looked at mother goddess cult, figures of young maidens like Shalabhanjikas, Alaskanyas, Madanikas, etc. The graceful Mithunas. They are all non-sectarian. You find them on temple walls of all the sects. They became the leitmotif on temple walls. And they were basically used as alankars or decorative motif for auspiciousness and to ward off evil. They were magico-religious, and they were there to avert calamities like cyclone and lightning. And I would say the already prevalent glorification of sensuousness and shringar in Indian cultural tradition got further impetus and a wider scope in its depiction of eroticism. And of course, most importantly, we saw that sorry, in the social climate, this elaborate representation of sex in literature and the feudal tendencies of the age in which these temples were built, they were already, they had the sanction of the Shilp Shastras or the religious texts also, or the architectural treaties. And the practices of religions like Tantra, and on top of that, the laxity in the societal fabric probably gave rise to this eruption of erotic imagery. And there was profusion of erotic imagery, and in the garb of religion, I would say, the sculptures were present on the temple walls. Also, I would say, not only but also for uh, mm, sexual gratification of men or for male gaze. And over the centuries, the very sacred purpose of celebration of female sexuality was kind of diluted in the patriarchal system and was reduced to the appeasement of men per se. And of course, the cultic sects of extreme tantrism gave place to the hedonistic practices, particularly when the sadhakas were not serious, especially the kings that I spoke about, the medieval kings. The panchmakaras were, misused because they were not really actually doing any kind of tantric sadhana. They were all there to acquire these occult powers. And also, not only that, now we come to more modern times. So, body shaming and other beliefs much came from the colonial bias or British bias and construct, In ancient Indian thought, there was no association of women with sin, lust, or temptation. Women were associated with the veneration for their generative powers, abundance, prosperity, and there was this an open embrace of sexuality as one route to the divine. In fact, the Hindu scripture Manusmriti says, "Yatra naryastu pujante ramante tatra devata," meaning where women are honored, gods reside there. So, I would say there is no one rationale or philosophical motivation behind this whole phenomenon of erotic imagery on the temple walls. I would also say that it is kind of a continuity, and it is the persistence of that very primitive thought and popular culture in a civilized society that these sculptures are there. And there is a there is a constant interplay of the magico-religious environment, and which belong to the majestic and courtly temples that they were built in the society that they were built in. All right. And of course there is this interplay of the secular aspect of sex and the religious aspect of the sex. All right. So far from being an anomaly, I would say, or uh, animally everybody understands. So there are totally in harmony with the religious environment to which they belonged, and the kind of temples that they decorated. They were basically there for as a decoration, as alankars. Okay. So now I feel we have almost come a full circle. Not all is lost. We have once again, we are on the, we have just about started celebrating female sexuality, and we are not so apologetic about it when we are trying to remove certain taboos associated with it. Of course, when you see, there are young mothers to be, they are showing off their baby bumps in public, or you see young mothers posting their pictures breastfeeding their child on social media, or Padman movies like Padman are the mainstream, part of mainstream cinema. So you feel that yes, there is still hope, and not all is lost, and you can one can clearly see that there is some little light at the end of the tunnel, and we can always hope for more. So I will conclude this that sensual and sacred, they are really not opposite to each other in Indian context. In fact, they have always complemented each other in terms of when it comes to religious depiction on temple walls. Thank you. Over to you. Okay, thank you.
So it was done, and it was successfully done. It was a brilliant,
Thank you.
brilliant presentation. You have proved that you are a very good teacher. You have proved that you are a very good researcher. And when we say researcher, you are a comparative researcher. Your comparison was marvelous,
Thank you.
divine ecstasy. You have
Thank you.
compared the folklore, the practices of tantras, and the deterioration in the tantra. You have talked about the text and the context. You have also talked about the essential and sacred. They are not the two different category. There is not a watertight compartmentalization between the two. Yes, agree. And we also say in the folklore, the beauty and utility, they are woven together. So, the female sexuality and sensuousness, and with the very, very, very appropriate terms that you have used, let us celebrate the female sexuality. It is not that we should celebrate it, we have been celebrating it. And there were some distortions because of the Mughals and mainly because of the Britishers. We have to correct those distortions. and the correction of those distortions is the most essential factors that we, the scholars of multiple discipline, have to think. I was working in the entire zone of Northeast with a famous anthropologist. You might have heard his name, Professor. I'm just forgetting. He is called the talking anthropologist,
Okay.
and Professor B.K. Burman. And when I went there, in Kamakhya, in the remote area of Arunachal, and also in Meghalaya, then we realized the distortion of tantric practices. Then we realized how the women are being subjugated, how their how their genitals are being bruised and broken, and they are misbehaved. We have to correct those things. We have to establish a society wherein everything is accepted. This is a very good thing that we have seen in this present world. We are using so many things. You have rightly talked about Kalidasas and Kumar Sambhavam, and also about the Parvati, the consort of Shiva, and her beauty. The tenderness, beauty, sensuousness, attractiveness, her comparison with all the beautiful women of the world. I'm remembering, Shiva Tandava, where the Shiva is being said that Dhara Dharanda Nandini Vilasu Bandhu Bandhurah Spurantiganta Santati Pramodabana Manase. वो जो उसका जो ओठ है, वो जो कुशाग्र चित्र पत्र का है, जो ब्रेस्ट का जो अगला हिस्सा है कूस घास के समान वो नुकीला है, और उसके साथ जो अटखेलियां करता है वो मामूली आदमी नहीं है. शिवा, it is you. That means you are the most deserving husband for the most beautiful girl in the world. That is the sense of comparison, and very good. The essence of Sufism is love, and love cannot be created without sensuous sexuality, without the sense of having. I know whether I should say or not, because you have already named Osho. Osho says that this missionary position in sexuality is something which is not really indigenous thing in India. It is an imported thing, and the Indians have practiced missionary practice after 18th century, because it has borrowed from the West. You know it better. So I am telling you that is, see, he wanted to say, if you are talking of the missionary position, you are disrespecting the women of India. So Indians were so careful about maintaining the dignity of their women, and that was your presentation. So you have talked everything. I was just, when you were talking about the system, I was remembering my database that I collected from my land, Mithila. There is a song called Batgamni, songs which are sung while going, छोटे छोटे रास्ते पे जो चलते हैं. And in those but Gamini, women are free to use all sensuous words. They're free. Complete freedom. The complete erotic. Republic. That is a total erotic republic. One can see and view and feel there. I have felt myself. So I have been telling you. You have given me opportunity to speak like this. So it was a wonderful presentation, ma'am. Everything was accurately done. You have done perfectly the time management. You have created wonderful content, and you have narrated in such a minute way, so that even a commoner, like you said, that when you are talking about the symbolic representations, in the symbolic representation, there are some doubts. Some things may not come down to the mindset of commoners, the folk. Here comes the role of the sensuous, erotic, and body, the body representation of the things. And that, that is so convincing. It has anthropological ability to understand this. Thank you for giving this. We have so many appreciation for you, Sanjeev Kumar Singh, Isnath Jha. Isnath Jha is a very prolific teacher of English, and he writes in Sanskrit and also in Maithili. So he said that he could not manage to listen to you from the beginning to the end. He will have his time and go through. I will share some of the thoughts. There are so many thoughts. I will share some of the thoughts. My son Sasang was very impressive with you. See, my son Sasang says, great initiative to explore India's ancient and unique culture. You know, when we listen some good thing from the novice people, that gives us a real, test of this thing. Sanjeev Kumar saying, what a great start. एंड हमारे दिलीप कुमार सिंह हैं, डॉक्टर दिलीप कुमार सिंह, सुंदर प्रस्तुति, अच्छी जानकारी. एंड again Sanjeev Kumar Singh, for this reason throughout their long history the arts of India, both visual and literary, have consistently celebrated the beauty of the human body. Like he has confirmed what you have said, ma'am. And he further said that I think this question has already been answered. Dr. Dilip Kumar wanted to know the eroticism in the Saiva temples and all those. You have already explained everything, so I think he got his answer. So I should one reference Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Singh gives you. He says in Sunga period, the Mithuna figurine are giving the indication of sensuousness as the male's hand is placed on the breast of woman partner, and this tradition is going on and accepted and respected by the contemporary society as it is the part of Purushartha. So you are agreeing or disagreeing, that you have to see, but you have already said the same thing. Again, he says theoretical perspectives on sexuality and religion as well as teaching on sexuality promoted by the major world religions. Yes. And using of female sexuality on erotic posture to convince the common people, really it's a great idea. And we have so many peoples. Bharadwaj is saying that it is greatly appreciated. ये पढ़ लीजिए, एलिया डेला नामक फ्रेंच विद्वान ने इन मूर्तियों के पक्ष में कहा है कि मध्ययुगीन मंदिरों के निर्माता किसी भी भांति असभ्य न थे. उनके विचारों को हमें गर्व के साथ ठुकरा नहीं देना चाहिए. उनमें अद्वितीय सूक्ष्म निरीक्षण तथा अपार ज्ञान था. उन्होंने मानव विचारों के सभी पहलुओं में सम्यक और असफलता प्राप्त की थी. प्रेम कीड़ाओं के अंकन से उनकी असभ्यता का नहीं बल्कि उनके मनोविज्ञान तथा प्रतीकवादिकता का बोध होता है. अगेन सिंबोलिज्म इज टॉकिंग ऑफ. आपने बहुत ही सुंदर वर्णन किया. जनमानस को सही अर्थों में विषय को समझने में आप मदद कर रही हैं. आपको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. इन मूर्तियों के माध्यम से आपने मनोरम मनोभावों तथा दार्शनिक सिद्धांतों को व्यक्त किया है. मनुष्य जीवन में प्रेम का बड़ा महत्व है. प्रेम सर्वदा ही सक्रिय तथा सृजन की ओर उन्मुख रहता है. इस तथ्य का साक्ष्य वेदों में भी है. एको हम बहुश्यामा का सिद्धांत ब्रह्म की सृजन इच्छा का ही प्रतीक है और सृजन की इच्छा के स्थूल रूप की नर नारी है. प्रजा जनन के हेतु जिस प्रकार ब्रह्म तथा प्रकृति का एकीकरण होता है, उसी भांति नर नारी का भी मिलन होता है. मनुष्य जीवन के कार्य धर्म के अंग है और सत्पुरुष के. ये इस तरह से पीपल हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट. ये एक बड़ा अच्छा है, क्योंकि जब कोई दूसरा व्यक्ति आपके विषय से बाहर का व्यक्ति बोलता है तो ईमानदारी से बोलता है. तो दिलीप कुमार जी बोलते हैं मूर्तियां बोलती हैं, कुछ कहती भी है. इसे समझने की जरूरत है, समझकर समझाने की जरूरत है. विद्वान वक्ता समझा रही है, बधाई के पात्र है. उसके बाद उन्होंने कुछ मेरे बारे में भी कह दिया है. डॉक्टर कैलाश कुमार जी बधाई के पात्र, छोड़िए. तो ये इस्नाथ जी ने कहा कि हम वो फिर से देखेंगे और ये करेंगे. Kailash ji, marvelous your narration and commentary. Thank you, sir. मेरा कुछ नहीं, marvelous तो मैडम का है. शुभ्रा झा है, शी इज ऑल्सो वेरी सिंसियर. शी सेज बहुत अच्छी जानकारियां मिली. एंड वी हैव प्रियंका पांडे, great info ma'am, presented very well. And this way we will get many more in couple of days maybe, and we will keep on informing you. Ma'am, agar aap word of wisdom we want to hear from you now.
Oh, well, what do you want to hear? It's just that sometimes what we see on the face of it, that is not the whole truth. And when we dabble little bit, deeply into it and
Yes.
search of truth, and that's how you can get to the core of any truth. And rather than just living with half-told stories and believing
Yes.
in them, I think all of us, it is as Indians, it is our responsibility, because these sculptures are so notorious world over. As I said, I mean, whenever I have any overseas visitor, I mean, I'm always asked, I'm bombarded with these questions.
Yes.
And I don't know how many of us are able to, and I'm not the only one in this, all of us are faced with these questions. So, this is a very, very small effort, to let people know that, we can still try to correct what, the world thinks about India or about Indian art or about Indian sculptural art. And likewise, uh, there are many, many such corrections that we need to make in other areas also.
Yeah, I agree with you, man, because I was talking to some art historians and also some anthropologists, and we were telling that why we Indians don't claim ourselves to be scientists, because we are not honest in our approach. Whenever we start writing, the politics is the first factor which gets inside our mindset, and then we are very biased. The moment you are biased, you can't be scientific. So if you want to become a scientific researcher in art history, museology, anthropology, archaeology, or any discipline, be very brutal with the subject. Do the operation the way you were talking about, the human physiology and all those things. So you have to dissect the body. Body means body of research, very honestly, brutally, without any bias, and tell the
Bias.
fact the way it is, not the way people want to listen from you. A certain section of community, a certain section of officers who are into their bossism, or in the certain sections of political masters. So do as researchers, not as someone who is going to please someone. So the pleasing and on that ism, the left and right wing. We don't have the third wing. So we, the scholars of India, have to create the third wing of thinking. And if this third wing is created, we can say that we are going to be methodical scientific researchers in social systems also, in historical systems also, in art history, in museology, in anthropology, in folklore, in ethnology, ethnography, anything you talk. And if we are honest, and this honest, what you call in research, heuristic, self-explained. So your paper, your presentation was a heuristic presentation.
Oh,
Man,
you're very kind.
so
Thank
very
you.
much. We are really overwhelmed. We are
Thank
very
you.
overwhelmed. We are not going to leave you. Maybe after 15 days or a month time. As I told you, this is the theory of folk brain. Once in folk brain, always in folk brain. Didn't I tell you, ma'am?
You did, yes.
Okay, so I think again we will disturb you, and I will request you maybe after 15 days or a month
Sure.
to deliver some very, very
Def-
meaningful,
def-
unseen,
yes.
undiscovered, or not greatly discovered topic
Okay.
for keeping the mind of the commoner and specialist together. That
Yeah,
will be the beauty of. Thank you
definitely.
so very much, ma'am, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaskar.